Picture a building, not a ruin. It's standing, it's occupied, it's full of life. Sort of. 7 stories of London stock brick so soaked with soot and coal smoke and decades of human grease that the whole thing looks like it's been dipped in something you wouldn't want to name. Walls that lean toward each other across a yard barely 3 feet wide. Staircases that have been repaired so many times with so many different kinds of wood that every step is a different shape, a different height, a different degree of danger. Windows patched with rags where the glass broke and nobody had the money to replace it, which was a long time ago. Now, put 400 people inside it, not visiting, living, sleeping in shifts, eating in doorways, sharing a single outdoor privy, 1 wooden seat over a cesspit, between 40 families, sharing water from a pump that is, right now, in this exact moment of 1858, drawing from a source that is also quietly and efficiently killing them. Welcome to the Rookery of 7 Dials, St Giles Parish, central London, half a mile from Covent Garden, a quarter mile from the Strand, less than 10 minutes walk from streets where you can buy French perfume and Italian gloves and silk that costs more than the entire building you're standing in. This is the city that built the Crystal Palace, that hosted the Great Exhibition just 7 years ago. That is right now laying sewer pipes and gas lines and telegraph cables across the whole of its magnificent body. Except here. Here, the pipes don't come. The gas light doesn't come. The telegraph doesn't care. This is where London keeps the people it needs but doesn't want to look at. Now. I make these history stories, and I genuinely don't know if you listen to fall asleep, or if you're just someone who needs to understand exactly how bad human beings have let things get before we decide to fix them. Either way, get comfortable, pull that blanket up, because we are going inside. 1 night, 1 person, everything she would have touched, smelled, survived, and feared. Here we go. You hear the court before you see it. You always do. There's a gap between 2 buildings on Neal Street, so narrow your shoulders nearly brush both walls when you pass through, and beyond it, the sound changes. The city noise, the carts and the hawkers and the church bells of St Giles in the Fields, all of it muffles. What replaces it is the court's own particular music. A baby somewhere above, crying with that thin mechanical quality that means it's been crying for hours. Not hunger crying, not pain crying, just endurance. The cry of something that has learned that crying doesn't help but can't stop doing it. 2 men argue in a doorway. You can't see their faces. It's past 8 in the evening, and there are no gas lamps in the court, only the faint orange glow from a tallow candle in the window above you, throwing more shadow than light. Their voices are low, urgent, something about a debt, a name you recognize. You keep your head down. Beneath all of it, the smell hits you like a physical thing. Not one smell. It never is. Layer 1, coal smoke, hanging thick and low on cold November air, coating the inside of your throat. Layer 2, the privy at the far end of the court, which hasn't been emptied in 3 weeks. You know the timeline exactly because you watched it fill. Layer 3, something boiling in the room directly above the archway. Bones, probably, being rendered into whatever fat can be scraped from them because bone fat can be sold. Layer 4, rotting vegetable matter from the pile against the east wall where people throw what they can't eat or use. And underneath all of it, underneath everything, the smell of wet stone and old dampness and the particular human odour of too many bodies in too little space. You've lived here for 8 months. You still notice it every time you come back. Your name is Nell Marsh. You're 14 years old. You came from a village in Wiltshire after your father died of pneumonia in February, and you arrived in London on a carrier's cart with one bundle of clothes, your mother's hand in yours, and exactly 3 shillings and 4pence that was supposed to be a start. It was a start, just not the kind anyone intends. You cross the court, stepping around the wet patch by the drain where the water never properly runs off, and you push open the door of number 7. Number 7 is what people call a common lodging house. And when I say common lodging house, I need you to understand exactly what that means in 1858. This is not a hotel. This is not a boarding house where respectable widows rent out rooms and serve breakfast at 8. This is a building that has been subdivided and subdivided again by a man named Mr. Buckley, who lives in Bloomsbury and visits the property every Friday to collect the rents. He has never, as far as you can tell, spent a night here. He's never spent a minute here that he didn't have to. The house has been chopped into units. You pay 4pence a night for the right to sleep in a room with 11 other people. 4pence is a penny less than the cheapest coffin house on the Strand, where the lodgers don't get beds at all. They get a rope stretched across the room to lean on while they sleep, like laundry, like bags of flour. At least here you get a bed. The word bed is doing a lot of work in that sentence. It is a wooden frame with a straw mattress so compressed and so stained and so colonized by things that move in the night that it barely qualifies as padding. There are 2 of these frames in the room. 4 people share each frame. You share yours with your mother and with a woman named Mrs. Dodd who sells watercress in the mornings, and with her granddaughter Bess who is 9 years old and coughs all night with the deep, wet sound of something that has gone wrong in her chest. The room is 8 feet by 11 feet. You know this because in a bad week, a week when the sewing work dries up and there's nothing to do but sit in the room and think, you've measured it in footsteps over and over, 8 feet by 11 feet, for 4 people. There are 4 rooms like this one on each floor. There are 5 floors. You do not want to calculate how many people sleep in this building. The front door is never locked. Mr. Buckley doesn't provide a key. The understanding is that lodgers can come and go as they please at any hour, and so can anyone else. You've woken to find strangers sleeping in the hallway. You've come home to find someone you've never seen before eating at the shared table in the ground floor kitchen. This is normal. Most people in the Rookery live like this. Privacy is not something you have access to at 4pence a night. You ease the door open and climb the stairs. The staircase has a particular personality. The 3rd step creaks in a high, shrieking pitch. The 7th step gives slightly, like it's thinking about giving way entirely. The 9th step is simply gone. There's a gap that you step over automatically now without thinking, without looking down. There's a pile of something at the bottom of that gap that you've been not thinking about for 8 months. You reach the 1st floor. The smell on the landing is different from the court. This one is almost entirely cabbage water, and the sharp ammonia note of the privy bucket that sits in the corner of the landing because the outdoor privy fills up and someone has to have a backup. The privy bucket is full. Someone will have to take it down tomorrow. This is an unspoken rotation. Everyone in the house knows whose turn it is. Nobody ever does it when it's their turn. There are 3 weeks of furious glaring and pointed silence before someone cracks and takes it down. Right now, it is Mrs. Hannigan from the back room's turn. She's been pretending not to notice for 5 days. You open your door. Your mother is at the window, not looking out. There's nothing to look at. The window faces the court, and in the dark there's only the faint orange of someone else's tallow candle reflected in the glass. She's sitting with her back to it, the way people sit when they want the surface behind them, when they need something solid to lean against. She looks up when you come in. "You're late," she says. Her voice has that carefully neutral quality it gets when she's been worrying for hours and has worn through the worry into something quieter. Mrs. Philbin had more work. You hold up the bundle under your arm. 12 shirts to finish by Thursday. Your mother's eyes go to the bundle, then back to your face. She's calculating the way you both always calculate now. 12 shirts at 3 halfpence a shirt. That's 1 shilling and 6pence. Minus thread. You provide your own thread. Always, that's the deal. Minus the candles you'll burn finishing them. Minus the wear on your fingers, which is not a thing you can subtract from an accounts ledger, but which is real, which is happening, which you can feel right now in the ache of your second and third fingers where the needle pushes. 1 shilling and 6pence for maybe 30 hours of work. Did she give you anything now? You shake your head. Thursday, when I bring them back. A pause. Mrs. Dodd over in the bed shifts and sighs without waking. Bess makes the wet chest sound in her sleep. 3 coughs in succession, then quiet. The rent is owed Friday, your mother says. You know this. You know it the way you know which step is missing on the stairs. Automatically in your body. Then we'll have it Friday. You sit down on the edge of the mattress and unbundle the work. 12 shirt bodies, pre-cut by Mrs. Philbin's cutters, already pinned. Your job is the seaming, the sleeves, the collar setting, all of it by hand, because the sewing machine is Mrs. Philbin's property and she uses it herself for the parts that matter, and the rest, the fiddly parts, the parts that take time, the parts that hurt, those go out to women like you and your mother who have needles and rooms to sit in and nothing else to sell. This is what's called slop work, or sweated labour. The newspapers have started writing about it. There was a piece in the Morning Chronicle 7 years ago. You didn't read it then, you weren't in London then, but someone quoted it to you once, in a lodging-house kitchen from memory, with the bitter precision of someone who had read it so many times it had fused to their brain. We found women working from 6 in the morning until 11 at night, making shirts for 10pence a dozen, out of which they had to buy their own thread and candles. 10pence a dozen. You get a farthing more than that now. Progress. You thread your needle. Your fingers know what to do without you having to think about it. That's the thing about this kind of work. After a few months it stops requiring your mind. Your hands do it, and your mind is free to go where it wants, which is sometimes better than it sounds, and sometimes significantly worse. Tonight it goes to Thursday, to the rent. Let me tell you about the lodging house system, because it's one of those things that has simply vanished so completely from the world that it's almost impossible to imagine it ever existed. In 1858, there are approximately 20,000 people living in common lodging houses in London. That's a conservative estimate. Many sources put it higher. Some sources, looking at the density of districts like Seven Dials and Bermondsey and Whitechapel, think the real number is closer to 35,000. These are people who cannot afford to rent a room, not a whole room, a share of a room. So they rent a place in a bed or a spot in a room by the night. The lodging house keepers, the people who actually run the houses, as opposed to the landlords who own the buildings, are usually former residents themselves. People who scrape together enough money to pay a week's rent in advance. then rented out spots in the same room they were living in, and slowly worked their way up to controlling an entire floor, then an entire house. Some of them are brutal, some of them are surprisingly decent. The good ones keep the communal kitchen reasonably clean and break up fights before they turn into stabbings. The bad ones pack in as many bodies as the space will hold and ignore everything else. Mr. Buckley, who owns number 7 but doesn't manage it, has hired a man named Cole to be the housekeeper. Cole lives on the ground floor with his wife. Cole is not brutal and not particularly decent. He is simply elsewhere, psychologically most of the time. He collects the 4pences. He periodically tells people to stop fighting. He occasionally empties the privy bucket himself when the situation becomes undeniable. He does not inquire too deeply into who is sleeping in the house or what they do for a living. This is, you understand, the polite version of lodging house life. There are places in this neighbourhood, in Church Lane, in Carrier Street, in the passages around the old rookery that the Metropolitan Improvements Act tore down a decade ago and replaced with nothing useful, where a penny buys you a strip of floor, where the bodies are so packed that if someone dies in the night, the people sleeping next to them might not know until morning. That is not a metaphor. That has happened. You are lucky in your way. At 8:30 you go downstairs because you need hot water for the paste to stiffen the collars. The kitchen is on the ground floor. It's a long room with a fireplace at one end, always burning because Cole keeps it going from 5 in the morning. It's the selling point of the house, the fire, a place to heat things and dry things and warm yourself on cold nights. There are 6 women in the kitchen right now. You know 2 of them. Mary Gaffney is a charwoman who works for a family in Bloomsbury. She walks there and back every day. It's a long walk, about 40 minutes each way. But she can't afford the omnibus fare and she can't afford to live closer to her work. She's sitting with her boots off, her feet propped near the fire. The soles of her boots are worn through in the middle of each foot, which means every step she takes, she's walking on leather the thickness of a playing card. The other woman you know is Sarah, who calls herself a sewer hunter. You know what that means now. You didn't when you arrived. Sarah goes into the sewers, the big Victorian sewers that Bazalgette hasn't built yet. They're being planned. They're being argued over in Parliament, but in 1858 they're barely started. The sewers that exist under London right now are not built for sanitation. They're ancient channels, brick tunnels that were originally streams and rivers bricked over, and they're full of every kind of filth you can imagine and then several kinds you couldn't. But they're also full of things that fell in from above, or were washed in, or were thrown in by people who didn't notice or didn't care. Coins, cutlery, bolts of metal, rope, the occasional piece of jewellery, small pieces of copper and iron and bone. Sarah goes in with a lantern and a pole and a bag and she walks the tunnels, waist deep in the water, hunting for salvage. She's very calm about it. She's been doing it since she was 11. How was it today, you ask, setting your pot of water to heat? Found 10pence and coin, Sarah says, and a brass curtain ring, and something I thought was silver but turns out was tin. Is it dangerous? She gives you the look that she always gives you when you ask the obvious question. The gas builds up, she says. You keep moving. You don't linger near the side channels. You learn the tides. The sewers flood with the Thames when the tide comes in. You go in at low tide, and you come out before the tide turns. She pauses. And you don't go alone. That's the real rule. You want to ask who she goes with, but something in her face closes the conversation. You take your hot water and go back upstairs. Here is something that no longer exists. The tosher. The sewer hunters called themselves toshers, and they existed in London from at least the early 1800s until Basil Gett's new sewers were built in the 1860s. When the new sewers went in, sealed, systemic, modern, the toshing trade essentially ended. The old tunnels were incorporated or closed. The access points were sealed. For about 60 years, though, a small community of people, mostly based in Bermondsey and Southwark and the areas around the Thames waterfronts, made their living this way. The Metropolitan Police theoretically tried to stop them. The sewer tunnels were corporation property, technically. But the police also had better things to do than crawl into sewers after people who were arguably performing a public service by keeping the channels clear. So the toshers worked mostly undisturbed. A good day's work, a serious find, a cache of coins near a blocked channel, a lost piece of ironware, could bring in 2 or 3 shillings. That's better than a labourer's daily wage. The risks were real. The gas was real. The flooding was real. Tunnels collapsed. Rats, and the rats in London sewers were not small, could be aggressive when cornered. Some toshers were children. Some were old men. All of them smelled like something you can't describe politely. Sarah is one of the last generation. By 1870, this job will have ceased to exist, completely and finally, and the only record that it ever happened will be in Henry Mayhew's interviews and in the occasional newspaper piece filed by a journalist who went down once and never went again. She is sitting here in this kitchen with her 10pence in coins and a brass curtain ring, practising a profession that is approximately 10 years from extinction. You drink your tea, she drinks hers, neither of you says anything else. You work until the candle burns down. That's not a metaphor either. You work until the candle is finished, because buying another candle tonight is not a calculation you want to make. The work can wait until morning when the light comes through the window. You've done 4 shirts. The seaming is tight and neat. Mrs. Philbin complains if the seaming is not tight and neat, and if Mrs. Philbin complains, she docks the price, and a docked price on 3 halfpence is a docked price on something that has no margin to give. Your mother is asleep. You can hear her breathing in the dark, the slightly laboured quality it's had since October. Not illness, she says, just the damp, just the November air, just the coal smoke. You lie down beside her without undressing. The blanket is thin. You pull it over both of you. Bess coughs again in the dark. Mrs. Dodd, half asleep, reaches out and pats Bess's back automatically. The kind of gesture that requires no consciousness at all, just the body's long memory of love. Outside, the rookery settles into its nighttime version of itself. And here's the thing you need to understand about a 19th century slum at night. It doesn't go quiet. Not the way you might imagine. Not the way a village goes quiet with only wind and owls and the occasional dog. The rookery has its own night shift. You hear the cart at around 10 o'clock. You know what it is before you hear the men's voices. The smell arrives first. That particular smell. The one that is so violating and so absolute that you understood immediately the first time you smelled it. Why people got desperate enough to do this job. The night soil men. Here is something that no longer exists in any form recognisable to what it was. The night soil collector. In the 1850s, London sewers are not designed to carry human waste. You cannot put it in the sewers. That is in fact illegal, because it contributes to the stench in the Thames, which is becoming a crisis. The great stink of 1858 is coming. You are living in the months just before it. By the summer of this year, the smell from the Thames will be so overwhelming that Parliament will have to suspend its sessions. Curtains soaked in lime chloride will hang at the windows of the House of Commons. Politicians will stand outside their own building, handkerchiefs to their faces, and finally agree to fund Bazalgette's sewers. But right now, tonight, in November 1857, the waste has to go somewhere. It goes into cesspits. Every building has a cesspit, or shares one. Every cesspit has to be emptied. The men who empty them are called night soil men, because they work at night, partly because the carts are not pleasant neighbours during business hours, and partly because the regulations that exist say they have to, and partly because a certain amount of darkness makes the job easier to do and to ignore. They come with wooden shovels and leather buckets and a horse-drawn cart with a sealed tank on the back, and they empty the cesspit by hand, in the dark, at night. The contents will be sold. The night soil goes to farms outside the city, to market gardens, to the horticulturalists of Middlesex and Surrey who use it as fertiliser. There is a trade. There are brokers. There are men who have made serious money in this business. The men doing the actual emptying are paid, by the standards of unskilled night labour, reasonably well. 3 shillings for a night's work. More than you'll earn for 30 hours of sewing. You don't envy them. The cart stays in the court below your window for about 20 minutes. You can hear the clank of the buckets, the men's voices, business-like, occasional, the voices of people in the middle of a job they've done many times, not unhappy voices, just working voices. Then the cart moves on to the next court. You lie in the dark and listen to the smell slowly, very slowly thinning out. Bess coughs. The baby 3 rooms down is quiet now. Finally quiet. You wonder if that's better or worse. The light comes in grey and reluctant. 7 Dials in November is not a place that gets much sun. The courts are designed, in the way that nothing about a rookery is designed, to block light at every opportunity. The buildings are too tall and too close. The court is too narrow. By the time the winter sun has cleared the roof line on Neal Street, it's already declining on the other side. You wake before your mother. This is new. 6 months ago she was always up first. She's been sleeping longer and longer. You've been noticing it and not saying anything about it. The window is coated on the inside with the condensation of 12 people's breathing overnight. You wipe a streak clear with your sleeve and look down into the court. Already busy. Mrs. Riley from the floor above you is at the pump filling a bucket. Not the shared pump. That one is down on the street. The one in the court is a private arrangement. A pipe running off the main, installed by a previous owner of the building 20 years ago. It runs for 2 hours in the morning and 2 hours in the evening. If you want water outside these hours, you wait. The court is about 30 feet by 20. Narrow, paved with uneven cobblestones between which decades of accumulated organic matter have grown into a kind of black paste. 3 buildings enclose it on 3 sides. A 4th side has an archway leading back to Neal Street, 3 feet wide, permanently damp from the drainage that runs along its length. In the court right now, Mrs. Riley at the pump, 2 children playing with a piece of string and a button, a man you don't know sleeping against the east wall, wrapped in a coat that is more holes than cloth, one arm over his face against the pale light. You've learned not to check if sleeping people are sleeping. You dress without waking your mother. Your clothes are a grey cotton dress that was once a different colour, a wool shawl that belonged to your grandmother and is the best thing you own, a pair of leather shoes with the left sole restitched twice, no stockings today. The last pair has a hole too large to ignore, and you have not yet sorted the repair. Your feet are cold from the moment the shoes go on. You take the water jug to the kitchen. Here is one of the most dangerous things that no longer exists, the shared water supply of the urban poor. The pump in the court of number 7 draws from a pipe connected to the Southwark and Vauxhall Water Company's mains. The Southwark and Vauxhall Water Company draws its water from the Thames at a point that is, let's say, downstream of some significant input sources. John Snow proved in 1854, 4 years ago, 4 years before your time in this house, that cholera travels in contaminated water. He proved it with a map of the Broad Street pump deaths, and he proved it by removing the pump handle and watching the outbreak stop. The medical establishment has largely accepted this. The idea that cholera is waterborne is gaining ground. The water companies have not particularly acted on this. The pipe in the court of number 7 has not been tested, and will not be tested, and the water from it looks clear if you don't let it settle, and tastes like nothing alarming. You have no way of knowing that about 15 yards from the point where the company's pipe draws its water, there is a drainage channel that is doing exactly what drainage channels in this neighbourhood do. You boil what you use for cooking. You've been told to do this, not because anyone here understands germ theory, but because boiled water tastes better and doesn't smell, which is a practical observation that happens to coincide with effective disease prevention. For washing, you use it cold. For drinking in a hurry, between tasks, when you're thirsty and there's no time to boil, sometimes you drink it straight from the jug. So does your mother. You're thinking about none of this as you fill the jug this morning. You're thinking about the 4 shirts you finished last night and the 8 you have left, and the 3 days until Thursday. Breakfast is bread and tea. The bread cost a halfpenny for a chunk the size of your fist from the bakehouse on Short's Gardens. The tea is something that shares a name with tea but is mostly dried leaves of uncertain origin and old dreams. You boil the water in the communal kitchen. There's always someone there, always the fire going, and you drink it standing up because there aren't enough chairs for everyone who wants to use the kitchen in the morning, and the unspoken rule is that you don't sit in a chair while someone else is standing. Mrs. Dodd is here before you, already in her shawl, preparing her watercress. Watercress comes in from the country on the overnight carrier carts, from the chalk streams of Surrey and Hampshire, packed in flat baskets. It arrives at Farringdon Market at 3 in the morning. Mrs. Dodd walks to Farringdon at 2:30, buys her allocation at wholesale prices, walks back to Seven Dials by 4, makes it into bunches using a technique she's refined over 30 years, and is out selling from her basket by 5. She sells until it's gone. Watercress doesn't keep. Every morning she starts fresh. If she doesn't sell enough to cover the cost of what she bought, she loses money on the day. If she sells it all and the price was good, she makes maybe 1 shilling and 6pence. On a very good day, 2 shillings. She's 53 years old. She's been doing this since she was 20. Her hands are the colour and texture of bark. How's Bess, you ask? Mrs. Dodd arranges watercress with the focused care of someone doing surgery. No different, she says, a pause. Better today, maybe. She kept down her supper. This is, you understand, good news. Keeping supper down has become the benchmark for better. You eat your bread walking upstairs because you want to work in daylight and the daylight's already going grey again. Your mother is awake when you come in. She's already sitting up, her hands in her lap looking at the wall. Not sleeping, not thinking. That vacant look that you've started to recognise. The look of someone whose body is in the room but whose mind has found somewhere else to be. Mum, she comes back, blinks, smiles. There you are, she says, as if you've been gone a long time. You give her half your bread. She doesn't argue, which worries you slightly. She always argues. She always says she's not hungry. You sit by the window and pick up the shirts. The work. You hold the shirt body flat across your knee. You line up the sleeve seam. You pin it at the shoulder, at the midpoint, at the wrist. The needle goes in at a precise angle, not too steep, which would create a puckered seam, not too shallow, which would mean it pulls loose. Your second and third fingers guide the needle through. Your thumb and forefinger, on the other hand, feel the material from beneath, making sure the layers are lying flat, making sure nothing is doubling over. This is not skilled work, in the sense that nobody would describe it as skilled. It is the kind of work that skills you invisibly, that builds up in your hands and your eyes as a kind of mechanical accuracy that you never think about and never mention, because there's no language for it and no market for it, and no way to sell the precision of your needle except by the shirt. 3 halfpence a shirt. You're making about 30 stitches per inch. Industry standards for a reputable garment sold in a reputable shop suggest about 20 stitches per inch is adequate for the public to wear without shame. You do 30. Because Mrs. Philbin checks, and because you were raised by a woman who does things properly, and because 30 stitches per inch is what your mother taught you, in a different life, in a different room, before the carrier's cart and the bundle of clothes and the 3 shillings and 4pence. Your mother is watching you. You're very fast, she says. You've gotten fast. Practice, you say. She watches a little longer, and then she picks up a shirt herself. Her fingers are less quick than yours now. They've stiffened this autumn, joints that swell in the cold. But she still sews a neater seam than you do. Tighter, more even. She was a dressmaker's assistant in Devizes for 12 years. She made things people wore to church and to weddings and to dances. Fine wool, silk trim, buttons that cost more than your daily food. Now she makes shirts for men she'll never see, at 3 halfpence a piece, in a room that smells of 12 people's sleep. She doesn't say anything about this. You have an agreement, unspoken, to not say anything about this. You sew. The room is quiet except for Bess's breathing, even now, and the sounds from the court below, and the distant church bell of St. Giles marking the half hour. Let me tell you about the economics of slop work, because the numbers are the kind of thing you need to sit with. In 1858, a man's cotton shirt in a respectable West End linen draper sells for 3 shillings and 6pence. A plain work shirt sells for 2 shillings. These are not luxury items. These are normal shirts that normal people buy. The materials, the pre-cut fabric, the thread, the buttons, cost the manufacturer about 10pence to 5pence, depending on quality and volume. The labour cost for that shirt, when contracted out to a woman working from a common lodging house in 7 Dials, 3 halfpence. The manufacturer is making very, very good margins. Now, the woman making that shirt, her working day is about 15 hours of usable light in summer. In November, about 9 hours of reasonable light, after which she burns candles. A shirt takes her about 2.5 hours if she's working efficiently. That means she can complete approximately 4 to 5 shirts in a winter's day. That's 6p to 7p halfpenny. Her bed costs 4p a night. Her bread costs a penny and a half. Tea, candles, thread, another penny and a half. She's been working a 15-hour day and she has approximately nothing. If she gets sick and can't work, she has less than nothing. The rent still comes due on Friday. This is what sweated labour means. It means the worker has no margin, no buffer, no room for anything to go wrong. And things go wrong constantly in a common lodging house in 1858. Charles Kingsley wrote about this. Thomas Hood wrote The Song of the Shirt in 1843. A poem so famous it made people feel guilty about their linen for about 3 years. Henry Mayhew interviewed women like your mother and published their arithmetic in the Morning Chronicle, and the arithmetic was so stark and so precise that it couldn't be argued with. None of it changed the price, not yet. Not for a long time. You keep sewing. At midday you stop. Your back aches in the precise place it always aches. The middle of your spine, on the right side from the way you hold the work. You roll your shoulders, you flex your hands, your fingers are marked. The needle-pushing finger on your right hand has a callus that is, at this point, almost architectural. You can push a needle through 6 layers of fabric without a thimble. Most sewers use 1, but yours wore out in September, and replacing it has been on the list of things below the rent. You need to buy thread. This is not optional. The thread you have will finish 1 more shirt, maybe 2. After that, nothing. Mrs. Philbin's instructions are clear. You provide the thread. You always provide the thread. If you run out, work stops, and the work cannot stop because Friday exists. You put on your shawl and go downstairs. 7 dials in the middle of a November day. The market is operating on the street outside the court entrance. Not an organised market. There's no designated market day here. No licenses, no stalls. Just people. People who have things to sell and no other way to sell them. They lay their goods on pieces of cloth on the pavement or carry them in baskets or shout them from the backs of hand carts. A woman with a basket of apples. Some of them still good, some of them showing the first soft patches of rot. She's selling the good ones fast, trying to sell the soft ones at a farthing for with 3 before they become entirely unsaleable. A man with a tray of used tools, a hammer, a file, 2 chisels with cracked handles. Everything on the tray has been used hard and discarded by someone with more. A boy, maybe 10, maybe less, standing beside a collection of rags laid out on the pavement. Not selling rags exactly. He's a rag dealer. He buys rags. He'll pay a halfpenny for a pound of good clean cotton rag, a farthing for wool, and he won't tell you what the rags are for, because the answer is that some of them go to paper making and some go to other uses, and the details are unpleasant. He looks at you as you pass, clocking your dress, the shawl, calculating whether anything you're wearing is closer to rag than garment. You keep walking. The boy with the rags is part of a system that has also largely vanished. The rag and bone trade in its Victorian form. You understand it now. You didn't when you arrived. Rag and bone men, or rag gatherers, or the kids who ran the neighbourhood collection points, were the recycling infrastructure of the 19th century. Everything got reused. Everything had a downstream destination. Rags, paper mills. Cotton rag makes better writing paper than wood pulp. This is why Victorian paper lasts so much longer than modern paper, and also materials for reweaving into cheap shoddy cloth. Bones, boiled for glue, ground for fertilizer, the fat skimmed off for tallow candles, the residue sold to chemical works. The bone boilers' yards are scattered around the outer edges of London's poor neighbourhoods, and on a still day you can smell them from a quarter mile. Metal scraps, smelters, iron, copper, lead. Everything gets melted down and starts again. Old clothes, resold through the second-hand market at Petticoat Lane or Rosemary Lane, or broken down for rag if they're too far gone. Nothing in the 1850s poor neighbourhood was truly waste. Everything was someone's income. This has a certain grim beauty. It also means that the neighbourhood's air, on any given day, carries the smell of all these processes simultaneously. The bone boiler 3 streets over, the tallow chandler on Short's Gardens, the tannery somewhere to the southeast. You can't see it, but on certain winds you definitely know it's there. You buy thread from a woman who keeps a small haberdashery out of her ground floor front room window, a plank balanced on the sill, displaying buttons and thread and small items of sewing equipment. It's not a shop, technically. There's no sign. But everyone in the neighbourhood knows she's there and what she sells. 3p for a good-sized reel of white cotton. 3p is 2 shirts' worth of earnings. You put the reel in your shawl pocket without doing the arithmetic. You've learned that some calculations are better not to perform. On your way back, you pass the corner of Neal Street and Monmouth. He's there every day, has been every day since you arrived. You don't know his name, you've never asked, and he's never offered. He's about your age, maybe younger. Hard to tell. He's small. He has a broom. Just a broom. Not even a proper crossing sweeper's broom. Just what looks like a domestic besom gone to almost nothing at the brush end. Every morning he sweeps a crossing, a path through the filth and horse dung that accumulates on a busy intersection, so that people, specifically women in long skirts and men in good trousers, can cross without ruining their clothes. In exchange, he hopes they'll give him a penny, not a guaranteed penny, a hoped-for penny. Some people give it, some people don't. Some people look right through him. He's sweeping as you pass. His arms work the broom in long, practised arcs, clearing the worst of the horse muck to the sides. His hands are bare. In November, his hands are the deep reddish purple of permanent cold. You don't have a penny to give him. He doesn't look at you. He knows, the way you know, which people have pennies and which don't. He's very good at reading this. His survival depends on it. You walk past him, and he keeps sweeping. Here is something that no longer exists. The crossing sweeper. Victorian London's streets were, by modern standards, extraordinarily filthy. A city of several million people, most of whose transportation was horse-drawn, produces an amount of horse waste that is difficult to fully appreciate. Contemporary estimates suggest that London's horses collectively produced around 1,000 tons of manure per day. Per day. On main roads it was collected. Teams of boys and men worked the major thoroughfares, clearing dung for sale as fertilizer. But on secondary streets, in neighbourhood crossings, it simply accumulated, mixing with the mud and kitchen slops and general effluence that sluiced off the buildings. Crossing sweepers, mostly children, mostly very poor, positioned themselves at busy intersections and swept a path through the filth. For this service they relied on voluntary payment from the people they helped. The best spots, near omnibus stops or outside theatres or at the entrances to parks, could earn a decentish living. A good day at a good crossing might bring in 6p or even a shilling. The worst spots, like this one on Neal Street, serving mostly the neighbourhood's own residents, few of whom had anything to spare, might bring in twopence. Joe, the crossing sweeper in Dickens's Bleak House, published 6 years ago, in 1852. He's based on something real. The inquest into the death of a real boy, a real crossing sweeper who died of fever in Whitechapel. Dickens sat in on the inquest. He reported on it. The crossing sweeper you're walking past right now, on this November morning in 1858, is alive. He'll probably not make it past 30. Not because of anything dramatic, just because of what being him in this place at this time does to a body. You turn back into the court. There's a pile against the wall of the court that you've been noting with increasing concern for about 2 months. It started as a modest accumulation. The kind of thing that happens when a neighbourhood has no organised rubbish collection, which is to say it happens everywhere and always, but it's grown. It's grown because people have been adding to it, because the designated cart that supposedly comes twice a week hasn't come in 3 weeks, because the court is at the end of a narrow passage, and nobody from outside has a reason to come here except the residents, and the residents have more immediate problems. The pile is now approximately 5 feet high and 8 feet wide. It contains ashes from the many fireplaces in the building, broken crockery, vegetable matter in various states of decomposition, rags that have gone past the point where even the rag and bone boy will take them, unidentifiable organic matter that your brain declines to analyse further, cinders, old boots, a broken chair leg, a doll's head, porcelain lying on its side, eyes open, looking at the middle distance. It smells, but not as badly as you'd expect because it's cold, and cold is a mercy in this regard. Someone will eventually come for it. The dust cart men, the men who collect the ash and general waste of the city, will be here eventually. The ash is valuable. It goes to the brickworks, to the fertiliser merchants, to the dust yards where it's sorted by teams of women, sitting in the grey sifted piles and picking through for anything recoverable. Bones, rags, metal, coal fragments. The dust trade is, in its way, enormous. There are yards in Islington and Clerkenwell and Pentonville that process hundreds of tons of household ash every week. The men who own the big dust yards are not poor men. The women who sit in the ash sorting it are. Everything has an economy. Everything has people on the bottom of it. The great Victorian dust heaps. The ones that inspired the opening of Dickens's Our Mutual Friend, published in parts right now, beginning in 1864, were something specific to the 19th century. The practice ends as London gets organised. The Improvement Acts, the Sanitary Act of 1866, the new Metropolitan Board of Works, the gradual, grinding, argument-heavy process by which Victorian society decided that perhaps 400,000 people shouldn't share 3 water pumps and a collective cesspit. All of this is coming. It's coming slowly. It's coming with furious resistance from the landlords who would have to upgrade their properties. It's coming with bureaucratic delay and political compromise and the particular English habit of not doing anything about a crisis until the crisis becomes undeniable. But it's coming. Right now, tonight, in November 1858, the dust heap is still in the court. The privy bucket is still on the landing. The water still comes from a pipe that draws from the Thames at a somewhat unfortunate point. You go inside. The afternoon is sowing. This is most of your life right now. This 8 by 11 foot room, this window, this needle, these shirts, your mother beside you. the occasional sound from below. You develop a rhythm. You and your mother sewing together don't talk much. You talk enough, but there's a natural silence that falls between people doing repetitive work in small spaces, a companionable quiet that is not uncomfortable. You've had much worse silences in this room. At about 3, the light starts failing. You keep going by feel for a while. Your hands know the work well enough to proceed in dim light, and every minute of natural light is a minute you're not burning a candle. But eventually the seaming starts going wrong, the stitches uneven, and you stop and light the stub of candle from the box. 6 shirts done, 6 left. Your neck aches. You stretch it carefully. There's a precise spot at the base of your skull that tightens after hours of looking down, and if you stretch it wrong, it sends a cascade of pain through your shoulder and down your arm. You stretch it right. Your mother has laid down without saying anything. She's not asleep. Her eyes are open, looking at the ceiling. 6 more, you say. Tomorrow, she says. Thursday's the deadline. A pause. I know, she says. Another pause. Are you all right, Mum? Tired, she says. Just tired. You look at her for a moment in the candlelight. The way she's lying, carefully, the way people lie when something hurts. Where does it hurt? It doesn't hurt, she says. I said tired. You look at her a moment longer. Go to sleep, you say. I'll finish the night's work. There is a thing that hangs over every conversation in a common lodging house that everyone thinks about and almost nobody talks about directly. You think about it when your mother says tired with that particular quality. You think about it when you calculate Friday's rent against Thursday's payment and the gap between them. The workhouse. In 1858, the workhouse is the last stop, the final institution, the place you go when everything else has failed, when there is no work, no lodgings, no family, no options. Under the Poor Law Amendment Act of 1834, outdoor relief, giving money or food to poor people in their own homes, was supposed to have been largely abolished. The idea was that if you made the workhouse bad enough, people would find some other way to survive rather than become a public charge. The less eligibility principle. Conditions inside the workhouse should be worse than the worst conditions outside it, so that only the truly destitute would enter. This worked if your definition of worked is large numbers of people endured terrible conditions rather than enter, and the ones who did enter found themselves in terrible conditions. The St. Giles Workhouse is on Endell Street. You've walked past it. The building itself is unremarkable from the outside. Institutional brick, narrow windows. It might be a factory or a school or a bad hotel. Inside, the deal is this. You surrender everything. Your clothes are taken and replaced with workhouse uniform. Your family is separated. Men to the men's ward, women to the women's ward, children to the children's ward. You work. The work in the 1850s might be oakum picking, shredding old tarred rope with your bare hands until your fingers bleed, or it might be the treadmill. The treadmill. If you're in the workhouse in the 1850s and the authorities have decided you need punitive labour, you may find yourself on the treadmill. Not a treadmill for exercise, not the gym equipment that borrowed this name and drained it of all its terror. The original treadmill, a large wooden wheel, maybe 20 feet in diameter, with steps on its circumference. You grip a bar above you, and you step continuously on the steps as the wheel turns. You are walking endlessly at the pace the wheel is set to, going nowhere. The treadmill at a workhouse might run for 6, 8, 10 hours, It grinds corn, or it pumps water, or it does nothing at all. Grinding the wind, as the saying goes, purely as punishment. Purely because someone decided that the poor needed to suffer visibly and measurably before they received relief. The treadmill causes blisters, then calluses, then something beyond calluses. It strains the knees and the hips. It is boring in a way that hours of sewing are not boring, because sewing at least allows your hands to do something, allows your mind to partially detach. On the treadmill, your body is fully occupied, and your mind has nothing to do except be on the treadmill. The treadmill was abolished in British prisons in 1898. The workhouse treadmills mostly ended earlier, as the 1860s and 1870s brought reforms. But right now, in this November of 1858, the treadmill on Endell Street is operational. You know this the way you know where all the edges of the danger are in this neighbourhood. The way you know which landlord will wait a day on the rent and which one won't. The way you know which directions not to look in at certain times of day. You sew faster. At 7 o'clock, Cole knocks on everyone's door to collect the fourpences. This is the Friday ritual, except today is Wednesday. Cole is collecting in advance. Thursday, Mr. Cole, you say, through the door without opening it. Your landlord has outstanding accounts, Cole says. His voice is flat, neither threatening nor sympathetic. He's said this speech many times. I'm collecting now for the week. I'll have it Thursday evening. I'm delivering work Thursday. A pause. Mrs. Marsh, Cole says. He's never called you by your first name. Always this odd combination of your mother's name as though you're both the same person. I need the money by Friday morning. You'll have it. Another pause. Friday morning, he says again. Friday morning, you say. You hear him move on down the landing to Mrs. Dodd's door. Your mother from the bed. Do we? We will, you say. At 7:30, Bess knocks on your door. Bess, 9 years old, still in the shawl she's been wearing all day, her small face showing the effects of a hard week. The shadows under her eyes, the pinched quality around the nose and mouth from the cold. But her eyes are bright right now. Bright in the way that a child's eyes get bright for something specific. There's a show, she says, down on Monmouth. Tommy Rees says it's a shilling. A shilling, you say. Tommy says if you go round the back you can get him for twopence. They leave a gap in the curtain. You look at her. Nell, please. Bess is 9. She's been coughing for 3 months. She has not, in the time you've known her, asked for anything. Just for an hour. You look at your mother. Your mother is watching this exchange with her eyes open. Go, your mother says. The shirts. The shirts will be there when you get back. Go. You pull on your shawl. The penny gaff is another thing that no longer exists, and its disappearance is only partly a loss. A penny gaff is a makeshift theatre, an empty shop, a converted warehouse, sometimes just a building with a cleared room and a platform at one end. You pay a penny to get in, hence the name, and you watch something. The something could be a melodrama, usually featuring a murder and a moral, a comic performance, a conjuring act, a song and dance, a living picture where costume performers recreate famous scenes from history or crime. The penny gaff that Bess has found is in a converted workshop on Monmouth Street, a sign above the door, Grand Exhibition, admission 1 penny. Painted in red, the letters uneven, one of the ends backwards. There are about 40 people ahead of you in the queue. Most of them children, actual children, below the age of 12, drawn here from the surrounding streets by whatever passed for word of mouth. A few adults. You and Bess are somewhere in between. You pay tuppence for both of you, through the back arrangement Tommy mentioned. The curtain gap is real. A 6-inch slit in a canvas hanging, through which you slip sideways into the back of the room. The room smells of tallow candles and wet coats and something fried. The stage is about 6 feet wide, lit by 4 candles at its edges. The performance is already started. 2 men in theatrical paint, thick grease paint white faces, red mouth slashes, are performing a comic scene involving a stolen sausage, a magistrate, and a woman who is either dead or sleeping, the ambiguity apparently being part of the joke. The audience, the real paying audience, not the curtain gappers like you, are packed onto benches 4 deep, shouting responses to the performers who respond to the shouts, the whole thing somewhere between theatre and conversation. The performers are not good. The jokes are simple. The physical comedy involves someone being hit with what appears to be a pig's bladder, which makes a sound like a cannon shot and gets an enormous laugh every time. Bess is laughing. You realise with a small shock that you haven't heard her laugh in weeks. You lean against the back wall and watch the man with the pig's bladder chase the magistrate off the stage, and around you 40 people who spent their days in exactly the kinds of conditions you've been living in laugh at the magistrate getting hit, and for 11 minutes, by your counting, you're not cold, and you're not worried about Thursday, and you're not calculating stitches per inch. Then the candles flicker in a draught, and the smoke from them drifts to the back of the room, and Bess starts to cough, and you take her out before the fit can take hold. The street is dark, truly dark. No gas lamps in this court, no link boys working this late on a Wednesday in this neighbourhood. The moon is a suggestion behind thick cloud. You know the route home from texture. The change in cobblestones where Short's Gardens meets the court passage, the place where the paving dips, the archway. You feel the temperature change, the trapped cold air of the passage. Bess holds your hand. She's still smiling, that cough-shaken smile. The man with the bladder, she says. The magistrate's face, you say. He kept looking at it like it was going to bite him. It probably would, you say, if a pig's bladder got the chance. Bess laughs briefly, then catches it before it becomes a cough. You push open the door of number 7. Something feels different. You can't identify it immediately. The landing smells the same. The building sounds the same. But something has shifted in the texture of the air, the quality of the quiet. You're on the stairs when you hear your mother's voice from the room, not speaking, a sound below speaking, the involuntary sound that bodies make when they've stopped trying to manage their own noise. You take the remaining stairs at a run. The room, your mother, on the mattress, on her side, knees drawn up. Mrs. Dodd kneeling beside her, a candle in Mrs. Dodd's hand held close to your mother's face. Pale, shockingly pale for a face that was just a face this morning. Your mother's eyes are open but not focused. How long, you say? Mrs. Dodd looks up. Her face tells you it's been long enough that she didn't send for you. An hour, maybe a bit more. She said headache. I thought it was the cold. Then she said... Mrs. Dodd stops. She got very hot very quickly. You kneel beside your mother, take her hand. Her hand is burning, not warm, burning. The particular heat of a body working frantically against something that has gotten inside it. Mum! Her eyes move. They find you. There you are, she says. The same word she said this morning. The same slightly confused arrival, as if you've been somewhere far. I'm here, you say. You hold her hand. You're thinking about the water jug, about the pump in the court, about the pipe drawing from the company's main at a point downstream of certain things, about the fact that you boiled the water for cooking, but not always for drinking, not always, not every time. You're thinking about cholera, but you're also thinking it might not be cholera, it might be anything, it might be something simple. You're very carefully thinking that. Here is what is true about London in November 1858. The third cholera pandemic reached England in 1848. It killed 14,000 people in London alone in 1848 to 1849. It came back in 1853 to 1854 and killed another 10,000. John Snow's pump handle, the removal that stopped the Broad Street outbreak, was in August 1854, 4 years ago. The disease mechanism is understood now, or beginning to be understood. The waterborne theory is gaining ground. Miasma theory, the idea that disease spreads through bad air, is in retreat, though not yet fully gone. But understanding the mechanism and fixing the infrastructure are two different problems on two different timescales. The Southwark and Vauxhall Water Company is still drawing from the Thames in 1858. The sewers are still draining into the Thames in 1858. Bazalgette's interception sewers are planned, debated, partially funded and not yet built. The people in the common lodging houses of Seven Dials are drinking water from a source that the people in Mayfair are not drinking from. This is not coincidence. The fever that takes hold of people in these houses, the recurring cycles of sickness, typhus, typhoid, cholera, and the dozen diseases that travel in contaminated water and shared privies and overcrowded rooms, these are not random. They are the entirely predictable result of predictable infrastructure failures. Your mother is 41 years old. She came to London healthy. She's been sleeping in this damp room for 8 months, eating bread and stewed scraps, drinking from the court pump, and working 12 hours a day in a cold room. Her body has been running without a margin for 8 months. Something has found that out. You hold her hand, and you're very careful not to think about Endell Street. You don't sleep. This is a decision you make without deciding it. Your body simply removes the option. You sit beside your mother on the edge of the mattress, your hand around hers, and you monitor her breathing, the quality of the heat coming off her skin, the periods of stillness between the bouts of shivering. The shivering is the worst. It comes in waves, every hour or so, a violence that seems to start in her spine and radiate outward, her whole body seized by it, her jaw tight, her free hand gripping the blanket. Then it passes, and the heat returns, and she lies there with her eyes half open, looking at something on the ceiling that isn't there. Mrs. Dodd sits with you for a while. She doesn't say much. What is there to say? She's watched this sequence before in this room, in other rooms, in the 40 years she's lived in lodging houses in this neighbourhood. Her expression is the expression of someone who is helping, because helping is what you do, and who has learned to keep the weight of what might happen out of their face for the sake of the person watching. At about midnight she goes back to her side of the mattress. Bess has been asleep for 2 hours. Mrs. Dodd lies down with Bess's back against her front, her arm over the girl like a parenthesis. "Call me," Mrs. Dodd says, "if she gets worse." You nod. You sit in the dark. The candle is long gone. You navigate by the faint orange trace coming through the window from someone else's light in the court, and by the small sounds your mother makes, and by your hand on hers, reading temperature like a text you've already memorized, and are checking again, compulsively, every few minutes. sometime after 1 in the morning. You judge it by the church bell, which you've learned to use as a clock. She falls into something deeper than the half-waking state she's been in. Her grip on your hand loosens. Her breathing steadies, not the even breathing of normal sleep, but the heavier, slower pull of a body that is working at something fundamental. You stay where you are. Outside, the night soil cart makes its second round of the week. You hear it stop in the court, the sounds of the work, the clank and drip and the men's voices. The smell finds its way through the gap at the window frame where the putty has cracked. You breathe through your mouth. The cart moves on. The court is quiet. Somewhere in the building, someone is crying. Not the baby from before. A different cry. Adult, muffled by walls. The kind of sound that comes from a person pressing their face into something so as not to make more noise. You listen to it for a moment, then let it go. You can't carry everything. The church bell marks 2, marks 3. Your mother sleeps. Light comes in grudging, the way November light always does in 7 dials. Grey first, then slightly less grey, then the pale, flat brightness of a day that has decided not to commit to colour. Your mother is awake before you notice. You've slipped sideways, your back against the wall, your legs on the mattress, something that was not sleep but was close enough that the bell at 6 startled you out of it. She's looking at the window. "Morning," she says. Her voice is rough. Her face has the specific, exhausted quality of a fever that has worked hard but not finished. The heat is still there under her skin, not yesterday's furnace heat, something lower and more persistent. Ember rather than flame. "How do you feel?" you ask. "Strange," she says. "Not bad, strange." A pause. "My head," she says. "I know." "Did you sleep?" You consider several answers. "A bit," you say. She looks at you, which means she knows. "The shirts," she says. 4 more to go. "Then I'll—" "You won't," you say. "I'll do them. Lie still." She opens her mouth. "Lie still," you say again, and this time something in your voice must carry the weight of the night, because she closes her mouth and lies still and looks at the ceiling. You pick up the needle. 4 shirts between you and the rent. Well, 4 shirts between you and part of the rent. 1 shilling and 6pence total for 12 shirts. The rent is 4pence a night for 4 nights since last Friday. That's 16 pence. 1 shilling and 4pence. So 12 shirts covers the rent with 2pence left over. 2pence, plus whatever's left from the bread money. You are a farthing above nothing. But a farthing above nothing is not nothing. You sow. The morning passes in the particular compressed way that mornings pass when you're counting something. The shirts go 1, 2, 3. The 4th one takes longer. The collar setting on the 4th shirt is crooked from the pre-cutting and has to be carefully eased before it lies flat. The kind of fiddly correction that takes 12 minutes and shows nowhere when it's done, and that Mrs. Philbin will still find if it isn't done. You ease the collar flat, you set it. You sew. Done. You bundle all 12, wrap them in the piece of cloth Mrs. Philbin provided for the purpose, and tie the bundle with twine. Your fingers ache, not just the needle-pushing fingers, all of them. The joints in your knuckles swollen slightly from the cold and the work, the tendons in your wrists tight. You flex your hands, working the stiffness out. Your mother is asleep again. You look at her for a moment. The bundle under your arm. The rent. Thursday, which is today. "Mrs. Dodd," you say, quietly, to the form on the other side of the mattress. Mrs. Dodd is awake. You can tell from her breathing she opens her eyes. Can you stay with her? while I take these?" Mrs. Dodd looks at your mother, looks back at you. "Go," she says. Mrs. Philbin's premises are on Drury Lane, not the respectable part of Drury Lane nearer the theatre. The other end, the end that runs into the back of Covent Garden, where the buildings are still the older kind, narrow and dark, the ground floors given over to trades that work with their doors open regardless of weather. You know this route the way you know the stairs, by texture and sound rather than sight. The place where the paving changes, the gap where a cellar flap occasionally stands open, and someone always seems to be loading or unloading something heavy. The sharp, cold draught at the corner where two streets meet at a particular angle that generates its own perpetual wind. The walk takes about 12 minutes. You do it quickly, the bundle under your arm, your shawl pulled close. Drury Lane in the mid-morning is already at full noise. The costermongers have been here since 5. The wholesale barrows come in from the markets. The street sellers buy their daily stock and spread out through the surrounding streets. There's a man selling eels from a bucket. There's a woman with a basket of muffins moving through the crowd with the specific aggressive efficiency of someone whose product has a window of about 4 hours before it becomes unsellable. There's a man on the corner singing, not busking exactly. He has printed sheets in his hand, and he's singing from them. He's selling the sheets, a penny for a broadside ballad about a recent murder in Whitechapel. The song both advertisement and entertainment, the lurid details arranged into verse with more attention to rhyme than accuracy. You pass him. He's good, actually. His voice is a strong, clear tenor that cuts through the street noise without strain. He sells 3 sheets in the time it takes you to walk past. Mrs. Philbin's front room is a shop in theory, a workroom in practice. Bolts of cheap fabric on one side. The cutting table in the middle, where a boy of about 16 is working through a stack of shirt bodies with a large pair of shears, the clicks of the blades steady and mechanical. The back room is where Mrs. Philbin sits, behind a table with a ledger. Mrs. Philbin is not a cruel woman. You want to be precise about this, because it would be easy to make her a villain, and she isn't quite. She's about 50. She was a seamstress herself 30 years ago, in a room not entirely unlike the one you share with your mother. She worked her way from pieceworker to subcontractor to contractor, and she runs this business now with the focused pragmatism of someone who knows exactly what everything is worth, because she once was the thing being valued. She pays 3 halfpence a shirt because that is what the market will bear. If she paid more, she wouldn't get more work from the drapers who commission her, and she would go out of business, and then she would pay nothing. This is the logic she would give you if you asked, and it is not wrong exactly, and it is not enough, and both of these things are true simultaneously. She opens the bundle, examines the top shirt with quick efficiency, holds the seaming up to the light, runs her thumb along the collar setting, checks the sleeve join at the shoulder. She is looking for failure. There is none. She moves to the next shirt, and the next. You stand across the table and watch her hands work through your 12 hours of labour. These are your mother's? She's examining the collar that gave you trouble. Mine, you say. My mother's unwell. Mrs. Philbin's hands pause. The pause is brief, 1 second, less, and then they continue. Nothing catching, I hope. A cold, you say, which is what you've decided to say. Can she work? She'll be well by Monday. Another pause, barely. I'll have another dozen on Monday then. These are acceptable. She reaches for the cash box, 1 shilling and 6pence in coin, counted out onto the table. You take it. You're careful about your face. On the way home, you stop. You've been telling yourself you won't for 3 days. Every day you've walked past the sign. The 3 brass balls above the door on Short's Gardens, the sign that says, "Money advanced on all articles of value," and every day you've kept walking. Because the thing you're thinking about pawning is the last thing. The thing after, which there is no further last thing, your grandmother's shawl. You stand outside the pawn shop for a moment. The shawl is wool, good wool, not the kind of wool that goes into cheap slop-work shirts, but the kind of wool that somebody made with attention on a loom in the West Country, in the kind of place that no longer exists the way it used to. It's blue-grey. It's warm. It is worth, you think, maybe 2 or 3 shillings to a pawnbroker. 2 or 3 shillings is food for a week. It's the difference between your mother eating and your mother not eating while she's too sick to work. You go inside. Here is something that still technically exists but no longer functions the way it did. The pawn shop as primary financial institution of the poor. In 1858, the pawn shop is not a curiosity or a last resort in the modern sense. For most poor families in London, it is a normal, weekly integrated part of household financial management. Monday, pawn husband's Sunday suit. Friday or Saturday, redeem it when the wages come in. Sunday, husband wears the suit to church. Monday, pawn it again. This cycle was so common that pawnbrokers kept special shelves for Sunday suits and knew their regular customers by name. The pawnbroker was, for a large segment of London's working population, the only access to credit or liquidity they had. There were no bank accounts, there was no social insurance, there was no safety net of any kind except the workhouse, which is not a safety net in any meaningful sense. The pawn shop on Short's Gardens is run by a man named Mr. Coode. Mr. Coode is not unkind. He's also not a charity. He lends on the value of what you bring him, at an interest rate that is legal and standard and compound, and if you don't come back for the item within the agreed period, it's his. The shop interior, low ceiling, dim, the counters thick with the accumulated texture of every kind of thing that has passed through. Clothing, watches, tools, a violin missing 2 strings on a hook to the left, a painting, seascape, framed, leaning against the wall, small items of jewellery under glass, their stories unreadable. Mr. Coode looks at the shawl. He doesn't touch it yet. He's looking at you first, the brief inventory that pawnbrokers do. Read in the transaction before it happens. "How much do you want?" he says. "What will you offer?" He picks up the shawl, holds it in both hands, knows wool. 18 pence, he says. "It's worth more than that." "To you," he says, not unkindly. "To me, it's wool shawl, 18 pence. You want a ticket? You want a ticket." You think about your mother's face, about the rent and the 2 pence margin, and the week ahead. 18 pence, you say. He makes out the ticket, prints on it the date and the amount and the item description and the date by which you must redeem it. He counts out 18 pence in coin, a 6 pence, 2 3-pences, a penny, a halfpenny, and puts it across the counter. You take it. The shawl goes over the counter. He folds it efficiently and it disappears under the shelf. You turn to go. "You can redeem it," Mr. Coode says. Not following you, just saying it to the room. "Any time within 3 months. "I know," you say. You go out into Short's Gardens without the weight of the shawl on your shoulders. The cold is immediately more present. There is a building at the end of the court that you have been told by Mrs. Dodd not to think about too much. It's not a building exactly. It's a lean-to. a brick extension against the back wall of the court, low-roofed, with a wooden door that has no lock but that you have never seen opened. "What's in there?" you asked Mrs. Dodd in your first week. "Nothing," she said. Then, "A body sometimes. When someone dies and there's nobody to collect them, the parish puts them there until the burial can be arranged." "How long does it take?" "Depends," she said. This was the entire conversation on the subject. You have not seen the door opened. You've smelled it once in summer, briefly, from about 15 feet away. A smell you recognised immediately and instinctively, even having never smelled it before, the way the body recognises certain things without being taught. This is what used to be called a dead house, and every parish in London had one. Before the mid-Victorian reforms, before the Burial Acts, before the centralisation of mortuary services, before the building of the large public mortuaries that started in the 1860s, the storage of unclaimed bodies was a matter of improvised local arrangement. Churchyards did it, in charnel houses beneath the ground. Workhouses did it. Parish vestries maintained their own arrangements. In a neighbourhood like Seven Dials, where people died at higher rates than they died in Mayfair, where the old and the sick and the malnourished and the simply unfortunate ended their lives in common rooms without family or means, bodies needed somewhere to go before the parish could fund a pauper's burial, so they went in the dead house. The pauper's burial, when it came, was in a common grave, a pit, multiple bodies, no ceremony, a minimum of expense. Unconsecrated ground, technically, in some parishes, though the church had been gradually relaxing this as the practical absurdity of leaving thousands of poor people unshriven became impossible to maintain. Your grandmother is buried in a village churchyard in Wiltshire, under a stone with her name on it, in a plot your grandfather paid for and maintained. If you die in this court, and you don't think about this, but the thought exists regardless, in the part of your mind that maintains itself independently of your permission, you will go in a pit with 17 strangers and a wooden board that might or might not have your name on it. You look at the door of the lean-to as you cross the court. You go inside. She's worse, not catastrophically worse, not the violence of last night's fever peak. But the heat hasn't broken the way you hoped it might, and she's been sick in the basin twice, and she's lying with her face toward the wall in the way she only lies when she doesn't want you to see her face. "I'm fine," she says, before you can speak. "I know," you say. You sit beside her. You have the shilling and fourpence from Mrs. Philbin, plus the 18p from Mr. Coode. You count it quietly, 2 shillings and 10p. The rent is 1 shilling and 4p. After the rent you have 6p. 6p is 2 loaves of bread and a penny left over. Your mother needs something more than bread. Hot broth, meat, or the water that meat was boiled in. You've been told this all your life, that the sick need broth, that broth strengthens. And you know it's true because you've felt it yourself in the one illness you had as a child, the summer fever in Devizes, and your mother made you broth then, from a marrow bone, and it worked. A marrow bone cost 3p at the butcher, on a good day. On a bad day, on a Wednesday afternoon, when the good bones are gone, it costs 4p. You count your 6p. You buy the bone. You have 2p left. You bring the bone to the communal kitchen and set it to boil. This takes time. A marrow bone needs 2 hours, minimum, to give up everything it has. You sit in the kitchen while it works, keeping one eye on the pot and one eye on the rest of the kitchen, Because in a communal kitchen with no locks and variable morality, an unattended pot is an optimistic statement. Sarah the tosher is in the kitchen again. She comes back in the mid-afternoons now. Her tunnel work is morning work before the tides turn. She looks at the pot, at you, at the way you're sitting. Your mum, she says. Fever, you say. Since last night. A pause. Has she kept water down? Some. You need to keep giving her water, even if she's sick. The fever needs the water, or... Sarah stops. You know the or. Cholera, when it takes hold, kills through dehydration more than through the infection itself. The body loses fluid faster than it can retain it. Keep someone with cholera drinking and you have maybe a chance. Don't. And the body simply runs out of what it needs to function. You're still not saying the word cholera. You're not saying it because you don't know for certain it's cholera, and because saying it has consequences. The parish inspector, the fever van, the hospital, the places that good clothes go in and empty stretchers come out. And you are not ready for those consequences yet. But you are giving her water. You're giving her a lot of water. Good, Sarah says. She's looking at you with the direct, unembellished assessment of someone who has been making survival calculations for a long time. Keep doing that, and the broth. She goes back to cleaning her boots, which requires attention even you find impressive. Here is something that no longer exists, the fever van. In 1858, the Metropolitan Board of Health, such as it is, and it is not much, maintains a system for dealing with fever cases in the poorer districts. When a case of infectious fever is reported, an inspector is sent to assess. If the inspector decides the case requires isolation, and the criteria are partly medical and partly practical, and partly related to whether the inspector's current mood tends toward intervention, a van is sent. The fever van is a closed vehicle, a horse-drawn box with ventilation slats in the sides. It comes to your door. Your sick person goes in. The sick person goes to the fever hospital, which in the 1850s is either the London Fever Hospital on Liverpool Road, or the Eastern, or the Southern, depending on where you live and how full the beds are. People go to the fever hospital and some of them come back. The ones who don't come back, the bodies are the parish's problem, and the family's problem, and eventually the dead house's problem, and eventually a pit somewhere. The fear of the fever van is specifically not the hospital. Some people genuinely understand that the hospital is the best chance. The fear is the separation. The fear is that if your mother goes in the van, you may not see her again. And if you do see her again, she may not be the same. And underneath that, the fear that has no rational bottom. The fear of what happens to you if she goes. The rent, the thread, the needle, the room. The two of you, with no one else. You stir the bone broth and do not send for the inspector. The short November day gives up completely by 4 o'clock. The court goes dark fast. The buildings on either side take the last of the light before the street does, and you're back to navigating by sound and memory and the occasional candle glimpsed through a window. You carry the broth upstairs in a cup. It's not much. A marrow bone is not a joint of beef, and the liquid it produces in 2 hours is more flavoured water than substance. But it's hot and it smells of something, and your mother drinks it in small, careful sips, sitting up, leaning against the wall, her eyes following you with the intent quality that sick people's eyes develop when watching is the main available activity. 6pence, you say, sitting beside her. She looks at you. After the rent, I have 6pence. She's quiet for a moment. The shawl, she says. It's not a question. I can redeem it, you say. when Mrs. Philbin pays again. She looks at the wall. One of those very long, very careful looks. "Thank you," she says. You take her cup. You sit with her while she falls back into the heat sleep. Outside, the court fills with the sounds of everyone else coming home. At 6 o'clock. Because you need air that isn't this room, you go downstairs and out, just to the court, just to stand in the cold for 5 minutes. While you're standing there, a man comes through the archway, tall, heavy-set, with the careful walk of someone who's been drinking since early afternoon, and is managing the effects through sheer concentration. He turns left toward the building entrance, then turns right toward the archway leading to Short's Gardens, then decides on right and keeps going. Gin. The specific kind of walk. You know this because you've seen it, and because the Gin Palace is 2 streets away and has been 2 streets away your whole time in this neighbourhood, a fact you're aware of in the way you're aware of the lean-to at the end of the court. Present, significant, best not examined too closely. But you've never been inside. Curiosity and something that isn't quite fear. Tonight, with 6pence in your pocket and a kind of restlessness that won't let you go back upstairs yet, you follow the man. Not follow exactly. You walk in the same direction. The Gin Palace has a different architecture than everything around it. That's the point. That's the entire design principle. You step through the door and you understand immediately in the first second what Gin Palaces are for. They are for contrast. Everything outside them is cold and grey and dark and damp and narrow and exhausted. Everything inside them is not that. Gaslight. Real gaslight. 4 jets burning along the ceiling, throwing a warm yellow flood over everything that is the colour of financial confidence and well-cleaned brass. Mirrors, actual mirrors, framed in gilt, running along the back wall and reflecting it all back doubled, tripled, a corridor of light that seems to go on forever into some better, brighter world that doesn't exist. The counter is mahogany, polished mahogany, smooth and dark with brass fittings on the beer pulls and a row of glass decanters on the shelf behind, the gin in them pale gold catching the gaslight like something expensive. There are about 30 people in here, spread across the room in clusters, standing at the counter, sitting in the booths at the sides. Not all of them are poor. That's the thing you notice. That's the thing the temperance people, who produce pamphlets, who occasionally stand outside places like this with their signs and their expressions, never quite acknowledge. The Gin Palace attracts a range of people, because the Gin Palace is warm and bright, and in a neighbourhood where warmth and brightness are not standard features. A factory worker, a woman in a dress that's better than yours but not good, standing with a man who might be her husband. 2 boys who are definitely not old enough, but who have found their way in with the casual confidence of people who have done this before. The man behind the counter moves along the rail with the efficiency of someone managing a complex logistics operation. He doesn't speak to most customers. They hold up a coin or a finger, or he simply knows from their face what they want. You order coffee. There's a coffee urn at the end of the counter, a halfpenny a cup. You can sit here, there's no rule against it, no minimum spend beyond what you've already committed to, and be warm. The coffee is terrible. This is not a surprise. The coffee of 1858 at the lower end of the economic spectrum is an experience that coffee has not fully consented to be involved in. It is hot and brown and bitter, and that is approximately where the relationship with actual coffee ends. But it's hot, and the gas jets burn, and for 20 minutes you are warm. You watch the gin drinkers, not obviously, not staring, but you watch, the way you've learned to watch things in the rookery, with the peripheral vision that pretends not to see while seeing everything. The couple by the window. The woman drinks quickly, the way people drink when they're trying to achieve a specific effect and are experienced at achieving it. The man drinks more slowly. They talk between drinks, not arguing, nothing dramatic, just the low-volume, constant conversation of people who have something to work out and are using this place to work it out in. The older man at the counter. He has been here before you arrived and will be here after you leave. His drink comes in a particular glass, a thick-bottomed tumbler already half empty, and when it's finished he doesn't say anything. He simply looks at the glass with a kind of meditative focus, and the man behind the counter refills it. You've heard about this. Everyone has. Gin in the 19th century is, in certain pockets of London, not a drink in the recreational sense. It is a coping mechanism that has become a lifestyle, that has become a necessity. It costs a penny. For a penny you can drink enough to not feel the cold, or the hunger, or the weight of the room you go back to for a few hours. The children who got dosed with gin to keep them quiet while their mothers worked. The factory workers who drank before shifts because the alternative was sobriety, and sobriety was the cold room and the hunger and the knowing. The old men who had found over decades that gin was the only thing that reliably made the arithmetic of their lives temporarily unimportant. This is not a condemnation. You're trying not to condemn because the people in front of you are people, not symbols. Their reasons are real. The gin palace is warm and the world outside it is cold, and that is a calculation everyone in this room is making. But you think about the baby crying on the first night you were here. 3 rooms down, every night the thin, enduring cry. You've never seen the baby. You've never seen its mother. You think about Bess coughing in the dark. You finish your coffee. You go back out into the cold. He's at the entrance to the court when you come back. You know who he is before he speaks. The coat. Good quality. Official quality. The coat of someone whose wages are paid by an institution rather than by piecework. The notebook. The way he's standing in the archway with the particular stance of someone who has a right to be there and knows it. Do you live here? He says. His voice is neither hostile nor kind. It is official. It is the voice of someone conducting a process. Yes, you say. Name? Ellen Marsh, he writes in his notebook. We've had a report of fever in this court. You know anything about that? You look at him. He's maybe 35. He has the red-nosed look of someone who spends a lot of time outdoors in cold weather doing unpleasant work. His eyes are neither mean nor particularly compassionate. They are the eyes of someone who has been doing this long enough that individual cases are mainly notable for being cases. My mother's unwell, you say, since yesterday. What kind of unwell? Fever, headache, she's been sick. He writes. Anyone else in your room? Mrs. Dodd and her granddaughter. They're both well. I'll need to see your mother, he says. Not a question. You think about the gap between you and this man, about what he represents and what that representation leads to, the sequence of events between his seeing your mother and the fever van arriving in the court. She's sleeping, you say. I'll be brief. You think about it for one more moment. Then you step back and let him through the archway. He's professional about it, at least. He knocks at the room door. He enters quietly. He doesn't disturb Mrs. Dodd or Bess, sleeping on their side of the mattress. He stands beside your mother and looks at her, not touching, just looking. with a kind of clinical assessment that reads the symptoms in her face and her posture without needing to ask them. Your mother wakes, looks at him. "This is the parish inspector," you say, from the door. Your mother's face doesn't change expression, but something in her eyes does, a brief, contained thing, the recognition of a category of event that she has probably thought about and hoped not to encounter. "How long?" the inspector says. "Since yesterday evening," you say. He looks at you, back at her. "Any," he begins, and then lists symptoms quickly, and you answer quickly, and the sequence has the quality of a script that both parties know, a script with two possible endings, and you are watching his face for which way it falls. He looks at his notebook, at her, at you. "How long have you been in this room?" 8 months. "And before?" "We came from Wiltshire. We lodged in Whitechapel for a month first." He writes. A very long pause. "The fever," he says finally. "Maybe typhoid. I can't say for certain without the doctor, and the doctor won't come to this court for a lodger without a signed request from the housekeeper, which requires..." He stops, reorganises. "What I can tell you is, keep her drinking water. Keep the room ventilated. Open the window even an inch, even in the cold. You want air moving. If she worsens, send someone to the vestry on St. Giles High Street. I'll put in for a medical visit." He closes his notebook. "She needs to stay in the room," he says, "not walking the streets." "She hasn't been," you say. "She's barely been downstairs in 2 weeks." Something crosses his face then. Not pity exactly, but something in the family of pity. The look of a man who is seeing a thing he's seen before and is perhaps slightly more tired of it than he was last time. "You're managing," he says. "It's not quite a question." "Yes," you say. He nods. He goes to the door. "Send to the vestry if she worsens," he says again. And then he leaves. His boots on the stairs, the creak, the gap step, the front door. Your mother looks at you. "Well," she says. "He's not sending the van, you say." She looks at the ceiling. "Good," she says. You sit beside her and hold her hand, and you count, without meaning to, automatically the way you count stitches, the days until she might be better. The day goes. This is what days do in the rookery. They don't so much end as give up. The darkness isn't sudden, it's gradual, the grey deepening by degrees until you notice you can't see the far wall clearly, and then you notice the candle has become necessary, and then you notice that it is night. Your mother eats some broth, a few spoonfuls, keeps it down. You eat bread. Mrs. Dodd shares some pickled cabbage she's kept in a jar, a halfpenny's worth from the market, but it tastes of something, and you're grateful. Bess is better today. The cough is still there, always there, but she's sitting up, she's talking, she and Mrs. Dodd are having an argument about something involving a game, and a missing piece of chalk. A normal argument. A nothing is wrong argument. You close your eyes for a moment and listen to it. After supper, there is the evening routine, such as it is. Cleaning the room, which means relocating the worst of the accumulated disorder to the edges rather than truly cleaning anything. Folding the shirts that still need to be delivered to their destination. Arranging the sewing equipment for tomorrow. Your mother from the bed. "Can you open the window?" "Just a little." You open it an inch. Cold air comes in, carrying coal smoke and the court's various layers, and underneath something that might be clean if clean were possible here. Just the cold of the night itself. She breathes it in. "Better," she says. At 9 o'clock, when you cannot sit in the room any longer, when the walls have their full evening smallness and the candle has reduced itself to a stub that gives more flicker than light. You go downstairs again. Not out just to the hallway, just to stand somewhere that isn't 8 feet by 11. The man from the second floor is on the bottom step. You know him slightly. He's a boot closer, works for a shoemaker on Endell Street. His name is William. He's about 25. He doesn't talk much. He's sitting with his back against the wall, looking at nothing. "Your mum all right?" he says. Word travels in a common lodging house the way it travels in any small community. Faster than you'd like, more accurately than you'd expect. Improving, you say, which is what you hope. He nods. "There's 3 others in this house sick this week," he says. "Mrs. Hannigan, the baby 2 floors up, and someone on the 3rd floor I don't know. You take this in." "The inspector came," you say. "He came last week too, for the Hannigans." A pause. "Didn't send the van though. Said it wasn't catching." You think about the pump in the court, the pipe and its source, the 3 sick adults and the baby. "William," you say, "where does your water come from?" He looks at you. "The court pump," he says. You look at the door. "Don't use the court pump," you say. "Use the street pump on Neal Street." "That's half a street away." "I know," you say. "Use that one." He looks at you for a moment, reading your face. You're not sure what he sees, but it's enough. "Right," he says. "You go back upstairs. In the morning, Friday morning, rent morning, you climb to the roof. This requires negotiation with the building, which has not been designed for roof access. But coal, for reasons best known to coal, has at some point in the building's history created access from the 5th floor through a hatch that may have originally served as ventilation. It is approximately 16 inches square. You can get through it if you remove your shawl first. You do it for one reason. You need to see something other than the room. The roof is flattish, sloped toward the court at an angle that means you lean into the wall of the neighbouring building for safety. The roof surface is lead, cold. The lead oxidized to grey-white, soft underfoot in a way that changes how you walk. But the view, 7 dials below you, the 7 streets radiating from the central column, though the column itself was taken down 30 years ago, and what's there now is just an intersection, a convergence of lanes. You can see all of them from here. Monmouth Street, Short's Gardens, Neal Street, the others running off at their angles toward Covent Garden and St Giles and Longacre and the world beyond. The Rookery. From the street, the Rookery of 7 Dials looks like a neighbourhood. Crowded, yes. Dark, yes. But from up here, from above, you can see what it actually is. A maze, not the streets. The streets you can follow with your eye, the regular grid of them, such as it is. But behind the street-facing buildings, the courts. Courts like yours, 3 feet wide, walled in by buildings that predate any plan or survey. Courts connected by passages barely wide enough for a person turned sideways. Courts within courts. You can see 3 from here, interlocking like puzzles, each one a different shape. Some with the court pump visible, some with nothing visible at all because the buildings lean so close overhead that the courts beneath are rooms, essentially, with walls but no roofs. 400 people, they say, in your building, in this block, this cluster of courts and the buildings enclosing them. The estimate is upward of 2,000. 2,000 people in the space that would, in Mayfair, contain 6 houses and their gardens. You stand on the lead roof and look at it. The chimney stacks. There are chimney stacks everywhere, coming up from almost every room, the buildings dense with them. Some of them are working. thin columns of grey-white coal smoke rising into the cold morning air. Some are not working, cold and capped with soot. The rooms below them either empty or warmed by insufficient fires or by body heat alone. The climbing boys. You can see one right now, 40 feet away. A boy, small, emerging from a chimney stack on the building across the court. He emerges head first, pulling himself up by his elbows, his face and hands so coated in black that all you can see are the whites of his eyes and his teeth when he looks around. He's about 8, maybe 10. It's hard to tell. He sits on the chimney top for a moment, catching his breath. Then he pulls a brush up behind him, a long-handled brush that he's been pushing ahead of himself up the flue, and begins to work the stack from the top. He doesn't look down. Here is something that should have ceased to exist much earlier than it did. The climbing boy. Master sweeps, chimney sweeps, employed children as small as 5 years old to climb the inside of chimney flues. A flue from a domestic fireplace is typically 9 inches by 14 inches. An adult cannot fit. A small child can barely, if they have learned the technique. Back against one wall, feet and elbows against the other, pressing outward to create friction that holds them as they inch upward. The technique takes time to learn. The learning process involves falling. The soot causes what was called chimney sweep's cancer, a cancer of the scrotum caused by the permanent exposure of abraded skin to coal tar. It was identified in 1775, more than 80 years before the morning you're standing on this roof, by a surgeon named Percival Pott. He identified it. He named its cause. He published his findings. Parliament produced the Chimney Sweepers Act in 1788, which required that climbing boys be at least 8 years old and be apprenticed legally. The act was largely ignored. More acts followed, 1840, 1864, each one tightening the rules, each one largely ignored in practice because the alternative, mechanical brushes operated from the fireplace, was less effective, and because the landlords of buildings with complex flue systems preferred the cheaper and more flexible solution of a small child. The boy on the chimney top across the court is, as far as you know, breaking no currently enforced law. He has a master somewhere below. He will earn his master maybe a shilling this morning, for which his master will give him a small fraction. His hands on the brickwork are moving with the automatic efficiency of someone doing a job they've done many times. They're not the hands of an 8-year-old, not the plump, uncarved hands of a child who has a different kind of life. They're hands that look like something older is wearing them. He looks up once, looks at the sky above the court, which from here, from his chimney top, is a clean rectangle of grey-white November, the actual sky, no buildings blocking it. He looks at it for about 3 seconds, then he goes back to the brush. You climb down from the roof before Cole finds you have been there, but the image stays, the climbing boy on the chimney top looking at the sky. You carry it downstairs with you, through the hatch, through the 5th floor landing that smells of whatever the family up there are cooking down the stairs, the missing step. The 3rd step's shriek, the landing outside your room. You push open the door, your mother is sitting up, actually sitting up, not leaning against the wall, upright, her hands in her lap, her eyes clear. The clearness is the thing. Yesterday her eyes had that turned inward quality, the eyes of someone whose attention is almost entirely occupied by internal events. Today they're out, they're in the room. You look better, you say. I feel, she pauses, testing the word before she commits to it, better. Yes, the headache is less. You put your hand to her forehead. The heat is still there, but it's different. Less siege, more aftermath. You need water, you say. I've had water. Mrs. Dodd brought some before she went out. You sit. The relief moves through you in a way you hadn't realised you were containing. A loosening, a giving way of something that has been held tight since Tuesday night. The rent, your mother says. I have it, you say. And the thread? I have that too. She's quiet for a moment. The shawl, she says. I'll redeem it. Next week. She looks at the window. The place on her shoulders where the shawl would be. I'll redeem it, you say again. I know, she says. I know you will. Cole comes at 10. You pay him in the hallway, outside the room. Because you don't want him inside the room with your mother visible. Not because Cole is threatening, but because the fewer people who know exactly how it is in there, the fewer possible routes to the parish inspector, the fever van, the decisions made about you by people with authority and notebooks. 1 shilling and 4pence. Cole counts it, writes in his ledger. And next week? Next week, you say. Cole nods. He moves on to Mrs. Dodd's door. You go back inside. 1 shilling and 4pence out. Nothing in. Mrs. Philbin doesn't pay until next Thursday. You have 8pence from the shawl and 3pence from the bread calculation, and nothing else until the shirts are done. You pick up your needle. Here is something that existed briefly in a handful of neighbourhoods in the 1840s and 1850s, and that has since entirely vanished from memory. The ragged school. Not a school in any sense that would be recognisable as a school now. No curriculum, no qualified teachers, no building designed for the purpose. A ragged school was, in its most basic form, a room, a donated room, usually in a church hall or a workshop, where children from the poorest neighbourhoods could come on certain evenings and learn to read. Just read, maybe write, maybe basic arithmetic. The children who attended them were the ones who had no access to any other education. The children of the rookery, the ones too poor for even the small fees charged by the common day schools, the ones whose parents were working every hour, the ones who were themselves working, crossing, sweeping, rag collecting, running errands, doing the 100 small tasks of the survival economy. There is one 2 streets away on Monmouth Street. It runs on Monday and Thursday evenings. The teacher is a retired schoolmaster who does it without pay. You've been twice. Your mother came once early on with you. The other attendees, a mix of ages and conditions that would not have been credible in a school anywhere else. 8-year-olds sitting beside adults. A woman of 40 who was learning to read alongside a group of children who already could. Boys who came in still wearing the evidence of their day's work. The dustman's boy with ash on his hands, the bone boiler's runner smelling of rendered fat. Nobody cared. That was the thing. Nobody cared what you smelled like or where you'd been or why you were there. There was a letterboard at the front and a man who knew the letters, and the rest was up to you. You learned to read before you came to London. Your mother taught you. One of the things she carries from the dressmaker's life, that gift. But you went back because of what happened there. Because in a room of 40 people who had nothing else in common except the inability to afford anything, there was something. Not comfort exactly, not warmth. The room was cold, but something like the opposite of invisibility. The sense of being counted among a group of people who were trying. The ragged school movement started in the 1840s. By the 1870s, it was largely absorbed into the new board school system. the public schools established by the Education Act of 1870, which created the framework for universal elementary education. The ragged schools disappeared because the thing they were trying to compensate for was eventually partially addressed. Most of what they were compensating for was never fully addressed, but some of it was. The days settle into a new pattern. Your mother improves, then plateaus, then improves again. By the following Wednesday, she is sewing. Slowly. Her fingers have stiffened further during the fever days, and the stiffness hasn't fully released. But she's sewing, the needle moving through the fabric, her face concentrated and present in the way it is when she's working. You don't say anything about the stiffness. She doesn't say anything about it either. The shirts come back, Mrs. Philbin's pile of cut fabric. You and your mother sit at the window and sew, the room quiet, the court sounds rising and falling below. One afternoon the climbing boy's master comes to do the chimney in your building. He's a stocky man with a face so deeply weathered by outdoor work in all weathers that it's impossible to read any expression in it. He comes with two boys. One of them goes up each of the two main stacks. You hear them inside the walls. The sound is strange, a muffled scraping, like something trying to work its way out from inside the building. The boys emerge through the fireplaces of each room in turn, trailing soot and the cold smell of the disused flue. They are, you note this watching from the doorway, not unhappy specifically. They are the way working children are, focused on the task, efficient, reading each new situation with the practical speed of people who can't afford to waste time being surprised. This smaller boy, coming down from the main upstairs stack, emerges through the fireplace on the landing and looks directly at you. "Right, miss," he says, addressing you the way he might address any householder. Then he takes his brush and goes upstairs. "Right, miss," like he's the one managing the interaction. You close your door. 3 weeks into this, you wake at 2 a.m. to voices. Not alarmed voices, work voices. The night soil cart is in the court. You lie in the dark and listen to it. The particular sounds, the buckets, the horse shifting, the men talking, short functional exchanges about the work, the logistics, the specific problem of the cesspit in this court which, as one of them mentions with the weariness of repetition, has been poorly maintained. Your mother is awake too. You can hear it in her breathing. "Do you ever wonder," she says very quietly, "who those men are?" You think about it. "Working men," you say, "like anyone." "Do they think about us?" she says. "The people in the houses, do they think about who we are up here?" "I don't know," you say. "I think about them," she says, "every time they come." A pause. "We couldn't live here without them," she says. "We literally couldn't. The cesspits would overflow. Everything would go wrong. And they come in the middle of the night and they do it and they go away and we never know their names." You listen to the voices in the court, the sound of the work. "Go to sleep, Mum," you say. She's quiet. "Every city runs on work that the city pretends doesn't happen," she says. "All the things that have to be done that nobody wants to think about." She doesn't say anything else. After a while, the cart moves on. The sounds fade. The court is quiet. In December, there's a body. Not in the court, not in the dead house lean-to, though that too in this winter. This body is found in an alley off Short's Gardens, and it is the talk of the neighbourhood for 3 days. The man was known here, a ticket of leave man, a released prisoner required to report to the police monthly as a condition of his release, who had been living in the court on the other side of the archway. He worked, when he worked, as a labourer at the docks, When he didn't work, he drank. He was found in the morning by a girl going to the pump. He had been dead, the doctor who came to look said, several hours. The cause, cold, which means the cold found what the cold always finds. The place where the body was already too thin, already working too hard, already running without enough margin. He was 43. The parish took the body. Standard procedure. He had no family in London, no one to claim him. He would go in a common grave, but first the dead house, for 2 days. On the second day, Cole found the door to the lean-to open. The body was gone. The story moved through the building in 1 hour. Resurrection men, body snatchers. Someone had known he was there. Maybe they watched. Maybe there were people who watched the dead house specifically, the way Toshers watched the tide, and taken him in the night. For the surgeons, for the anatomy theatres, for the students who paid a shilling to watch a body dissected as demonstration. This happens, still happens, in 1858. The Anatomy Act of 1832 was supposed to solve it, was supposed to redirect the supply of corpses to medical students from the executed criminal population to the unclaimed bodies of paupers who could now be donated to medicine if nobody claimed them within 48 hours. This was more humane than the previous system only in the narrowest possible technical sense. The effect was to make the poorest people, who had no power to object and no means to pay for proper burial, the primary source of medical training material, which the resurrection men had already been exploiting anyway, and continued to exploit when the unclaimed bodies happened to go somewhere with a door that could be opened. The man from the next court, his name was James Hartley. He was 43. He had served 4 years for something the building knew vaguely and didn't discuss. He had come back and been trying. He is now most likely on a table somewhere. You think about this for a long time. Sarah, the Tosher, tells you about the flash house the following week. You've asked her, asked directly without the usual careful approach, about a boy you've noticed on the corner of Monmouth Street in the evenings. Too young to be a regular worker, too old to be street playing. His eyes have a specific quality you've started to recognise. The quality of someone running a calculation about every person who walks past, cataloguing potential and risks simultaneously. He'll be from a flash house, Sarah says, without particular concern. The flash house. You didn't know the term, but you understand it immediately. A house, usually run by a fence or a receiver of stolen goods, where young thieves are housed and fed and trained. The housekeeper takes a percentage. In exchange, the children get food, a bed, protection of sorts. They start them young, Sarah says. The younger the better for small pickpocketing. Small hands can get into pockets a grown hand can't manage. Are there many? Were many, she says. Less now. The police have been raiding them more. There was a big push a few years back, had them in the papers. A pause. But they move. They move and they reopen somewhere else, and the boys go with them. You look at the boy on the corner. He sees you looking. His expression doesn't change. Don't look at him directly, Sarah says, and her voice has the tone of someone who knows exactly what happens next if you engage. You look away. The thing about flash houses, Sarah says, is that for some of those boys, they're the only thing standing between them and starving in the street. I know we're not supposed to say that, but it's what I think. You think about it. The boy on the corner, the calculation in his eyes, the weighing. Flash houses, receiving houses, training houses for child thieves exist in a form into the 1860s and 1870s. when sustained police pressure and the gradual development of reformatory schools begin to provide alternatives. The reformatories are not comfortable, but they are visible, and they are not training children to pick pockets. The alternatives, it always comes back to the alternatives. Your mother's fingers get worse in January. Not the fever. The fever has passed, has been gone since mid-December, and she is well in every other sense. But her right hand, the sewing hand, the first and second knuckles of her index and middle fingers, and the base joint of her thumb have swollen to the point where the range of motion is limited. She can still sew, but more slowly, and with a wince on certain stitches that she suppresses but can't fully hide. Rheumatism, the word no one says but everyone knows. Cold and damp and 12 years of precise repetitive handwork in inadequate heat. She sews. 4 shirts where she used to do 6. The arithmetic shifts. You compensate. You do 8. 8 shirts a day. 30 stitches per inch. 11 hours. Your second and third fingers have gone past callous into something that doesn't have a name. A hardness that you can test with your thumbnail, pressing into the pad of the finger and feeling almost nothing. You don't think about this. You count stitches. In February the wind changes. This is not metaphorical. The wind, which has been coming from the west for most of the winter, bringing the relatively clean air off the Thames and the parks to the west of the city, shifts in February to the east. And from the east comes everything that lives east of 7 Dials, which is the tanneries of Bermondsey, the slaughterhouses of Smithfield, the boneyards. The boneyard smell is something that once experienced is never confused with anything else. It is the smell of animal fat being rendered, of bones being boiled down for glue and fertilizer, and the base materials of a dozen industrial processes. It is organic and deep and persistent in a way that coal smoke, which is at least dry, is not. It gets into cloth, it gets into hair, it gets into the straw mattress and the walls and the particular microclimate of the room. You mention it to Mrs. Dodd, who's been here for 30 years. East wind, she says, happens sometimes, February especially. She doesn't look up from her watercress. It passes. How long? Depends. A pause. Week, 2 weeks. That's. It passes, she says again. Final. You close the window. The smell is already inside. The bone boilers of Victorian London operated in specific districts, mostly in the areas around Bermondsey, Whitechapel, and the riverside in Suffolk. They were positioned here because the smell made them incompatible with residential life, which is a judgment that did not extend to the residential life of poor people who happened to live downwind. The Nuisances Removal Acts of the 1850s gave local authorities power to shut down businesses that created injurious smells. The application of this power was, predictably, more vigorous in some neighbourhoods than others. The bone boilers operated until they were replaced by the modern rendering industry, which solved the smell problem not by eliminating it, but by moving it further from the city to industrial zones in the outer suburbs. This smell, 2 weeks later, is gone. Mrs. Dodd had said, "It passes. Spring arrives in March the way it always arrives in London, not with any particular warmth, just with the change in the quality of the cold. Less the cold of siege, more the cold of retreat. The kind of cold that has admitted it's losing and is making an orderly departure. The court gets more light. An hour more, then 2, the sun actually clearing the roofline before noon and falling in a stripe across the cobblestones of the court. The stripe of sun. You watch it from the window. The shirt work in your lap. Your mother beside you. The sun falls on the wet cobblestones and dries them briefly in a patch. It falls on the pile by the east wall, as now reduced, the dust cart having finally come, and shows everything it contains in sharp, cruel detail. It falls on Bess, who is sitting on the steps of the building opposite, her face turned up to it. Her eyes are closed. Her shawl is pulled up. She has the absolute purposeful stillness of someone using something before it moves. The cough is better. Not gone. The cough, you understand now, is probably not going to be entirely gone. It is part of Bess in the way that your calluses are part of you, but better. The spring air, even this March air, even this air that carries everything the city carries, is better than the compressed December air of the room. Mrs. Dodd, watching Bess from the window, has the face she always has when she's watching Bess. The particular face of a person managing love and fear simultaneously, which is a face that requires muscle control to maintain. She's stronger, you say. She is, Mrs. Dodd says, not elaborating, not adding the qualifiers, just she is. In June, they pull down the building next door, not number 7. The one to the east, number 9 or whatever it was called, a building structurally identical to yours, equally packed, equally impossible. The Metropolitan Board of Works, in preparation for a street improvement that will widen the access from Neal Street, has purchased the building under compulsory order. The residents, where did they go? You watch, from the court, as the families emerge over 2 days, carrying what they have, and you don't know where they go. Somewhere else. Another court, another 4p a night room in another building in another section of the city that has not yet been marked for improvement. The building comes down over a week. The demolition men, navvies mostly with picks and sledgehammers, work from the top down, pulling the building apart layer by layer. The inside revealed, all those rooms, the size of them, which you already knew, but which is different to see exposed. The wallpaper in one room on the 3rd floor, actual wallpaper, a faded brown floral pattern, the walls of a room that someone had tried to make into a room, the fireplace mantels, the marks on the wall where furniture stood for years and left shadows in the grime, all of it open to the air now, naked, and then gone, the walls falling inward, the timber rotting from inside. You watch it from the court. This is the thing that is vanishing right now, in this period, in this decade, the rookery itself. Not just in 7 Dials, though 7 Dials is being slowly broken open, the courts being absorbed, the worst buildings coming down, all across London. The worst slums of the city are being demolished in the 1850s and 1860s by the Metropolitan Board of Works and the railway companies, who need the land, and the improvement commissioners, who need the streets. It's called slum clearance, and it is in some ways genuinely good. The worst buildings, the most dangerous courts, the places where disease concentrates most effectively, come down. What replaces them is not housing for the people who are living there. Not yet. Not for decades. The new roads are built. The new railway viaducts are built. And the people who lived where those things now stand move somewhere else. Move to the remaining courts, which are now more crowded than they were before. The clearance disperses the rookery. It does not solve the rookery. Not yet. The solving comes later, gradually, through an accumulation of things. The sewers, the Artisans' Dwellings Act of 1875, the London County Council, the slow, fought-over, never quite sufficient decades of housing reform. The Rookery of Seven Dials as it exists in 1858. The specific density, the specific poverty, the specific courts, and lean-tos and dead houses and privies and shared pumps and all the things you've learned to navigate and to live within will be mostly gone by 1890. Mostly. You watch the wall come down and the room inside it go open to the sky. Autumn again. You've been here a year and some months. The second autumn is different from the first. Not easier, but different. You know the coat of it. You know the smell of November returning to the court, the particular chill that comes with the first week of real cold. Your mother is sewing. Her right hand is slower than it was. The knuckles always slightly swollen now regardless of season. But she has adapted. She's found a grip that protects the worst joints. She does fewer shirts per day, but she does them, and the rhythm between you is so established now that you sew in silence, occasionally finishing each other's thought when it surfaces into speech, and then fall back into the quiet that is not uncomfortable. Mrs. Dodd is buying her watercress. Bess is going to the ragged school on Monmouth Street on Thursdays. She's learning to read faster than you'd have believed, and she reads to you sometimes in the evenings, laboriously, from a printed sheet she was given, her finger under each word, her brow furrowed with the effort of it. You're learning to manage a year. This is the thing nobody told you about poverty, the part that the articles in the Morning Chronicle and the parliamentary reports don't capture, the management of it, the skill of it, the particular knowledge you accumulate about where the margins are, which days can carry which expenses, how to pace the work against the rent, against the bread, against the thread, how to build in the tiny buffers, the halfpenny saved here, the bone bought cheap on a Wednesday. That mean the next crisis finds you not at zero. You're not comfortable. You're not safe in any lasting sense. Your mother's hands are getting worse and you know it, and you sew to make up the difference, and you don't think about what happens when the difference can't be made up by sewing faster. But you are here. You are managing. You have learned what there is to learn about living in this place. The light goes at 4. Your mother is asleep early. She sleeps more now, a tired that isn't illness, but isn't nothing either. You cover her. Bess and Mrs. Dodd are downstairs in the kitchen with their evening routine. You sit at the window with a candle and look out at the court. The court in evening, the pump in the corner. You don't use it anymore. Haven't since November last year, since the conversation with William on the stairs. You use the street pump, the half-street walk, the cold jug. Nobody knows why except you and William, who has also stopped using the court pump and hasn't asked for an explanation. The pile against the east wall, smaller now, with the dustmen coming more regularly since the complaints last summer. The lean-to door closed. Someone went in February. Someone else came out. You didn't ask. The archway to Neal Street, with its permanent draught and its smell of trapped water and old stone, through it the suggestion of the street, movement, light, the city continuing its endless business. You look at it for a while. The court has been your world for over a year, 8 feet by 11 feet, and the court beyond it, and the streets beyond the court, and the city beyond the streets. This was supposed to be temporary. Come to London, find work, find something better, move towards something. This was the plan. The plan hasn't updated itself. But you think about the climbing boy on the chimney, the 3 seconds he spent looking at the sky before going back to the brush. You think about Bess reading her sheet, her finger under the words, her brow furrowed with the effort that isn't quite yet ease. You think about your mother, asleep, her swollen hands resting at her sides. You think about James Hartley, who was 43. The candle burns down. You don't light another. You sit in the dark with the sounds of the court coming up through the window, the voices, the pump handle, the distant church bell, the particular urban night sound that has no equivalent anywhere else, the sound of density of many lives continuing simultaneously in the dark. Somewhere the night soil men are working. You hear them 2 courts over, the familiar sequence of sounds, the horse, the buckets, the voices doing their work. Somewhere the toshers are in the sewers, knee-deep in the tide, their lanterns moving through the brick tunnels. Sarah is there, probably, moving carefully, keeping an eye on the water level. Somewhere in this city a body is going into the ground that should have had more years, and another is going onto a table that should have had a choice, and another is going into the lean-to in somebody's court, and the door is closed and the night is cold. And somewhere the gin palace is open, and the gaslight is burning, and someone is warm for the first time all day. And the fact that this is also the last shilling of the week doesn't matter yet. Doesn't matter for another 2 hours at least. And sometimes 2 hours is what you need. And somewhere a ragged school teacher is writing letters on a board for adults who are learning them at 40, because 40 is not too late, and because nobody told them at 7 that it wouldn't be, and they had to discover it themselves. And somewhere Bess is sleeping, and her breathing tonight is quieter than it was in November, and Mrs. Dodd has her arm around her, and the cough, tonight, is letting her sleep. The city doesn't go quiet. This is the last thing you knew when you came, and the first thing you truly understood when you stayed. The city doesn't stop, not at midnight, not at 3, not in the grey hours before dawn when even the gin palaces have finally shut their doors. Something is always moving. Something is always working. The night soil men are doing their rounds. The bakers are starting their ovens for the morning bread. The fish carts are coming in from the coast. The early watercress arrives at Farringdon Market, and Mrs. Dodd is already putting on her shawl in the kitchen below. This city, this specific city, this place in this time, is alive in a way that has a cost, and the cost is mostly paid by people like you, and the people you share a room with, and the people below you and above you in this building, and the people in the courts on either side. But you are still here. You lie down beside your mother in the dark. The blanket is thin. It's always thin. But you are on the inner side, and she is on the outer side, and between the two of you there is warmth enough. Your hands resting beside your face. You can feel the calluses even now, the hardened places where the needle has made its permanent impression. The work is there in your hands even when the work isn't there, even in the dark, even in the few hours that belong to nothing but rest. You are 14 years old. You've been here 15 months. You have learned where to get water that won't make you sick, how to negotiate with a pawnbroker, how to paste 12 shirts across 3 days without breaking the margin, how to navigate the court at night by sound, how to lie still when the night soil cart comes and let the smell pass, how to read the quality of a fever, how to manage on sixpence, how to eat bread that's a day old and not mined. You have learned where the dead house is and what it contains and why the door is better left closed. You have learned the name of the church bell you hear at 3 in the morning, St. Giles in the Fields. The church that has been ringing here for longer than London has been what it is, longer than any of these buildings, longer than the rookery itself, which is already old in 1858 and will be gone by 1880. The bells, ringing for 300 years over these exact streets. Your grandmother's grandmother's grandmother heard this bell. You close your eyes. The court is outside the window carrying its sounds. The city is beyond the court carrying its larger sounds. The century is around all of it. The century that is already, in 1858, beginning to change the things that need changing slowly, too slowly, with too many arguments and too many people left behind in the interim. The sewers will be built. The drinking water will be tested. The climbing boys will be stopped. The workhouses will become something less terrible than nothing at all. The dead houses will be replaced by public mortuaries, by hospitals that actually function, by systems designed to care for people rather than to minimise their cost to the parish. These things will happen. They will happen after your time here. Most of them, all of the big ones. You will not benefit from them in this room on this night, but you are here tonight. You are warm enough, barely. You are fed enough, marginally. You are safe enough for now. Your mother is breathing beside you, steady, her hands at rest. Bess is breathing below, 2 floors down, her cough quiet for one more night. The city is breathing all around you, its enormous uneven breath, the breath of 500,000 people who are also in their rooms right now, also lying down, also listening to the sounds and letting them finally, after everything, begin to blur. The pump handle, the church bell, distant. Not the closest one, the far one, somewhere east, marking the hour in a voice that carries over rooftops. The cart moving away down the alley. The horse's shoes on stone, quieting. Someone below you, in the kitchen, moving quietly. Mrs. Dodd, probably, beginning the watercress preparation in the dark before the market. The creak of the building settling into the cold. Buildings breathe too, these old buildings, the wood and the plaster, and the compressed centuries of repair shifting slightly as the temperature drops, making the small sounds of something alive. You hear it all, and then you hear it less, and then you hear it as you hear things in the place between waking and sleep, where everything becomes the same texture. Just sound, just presence, just the world continuing without requiring your attention for a little while. Your hands rest, your needle rests, the city works on without you. It will be there in the morning, enormous, difficult, indifferent, full of things you haven't learned yet, and things you never will. Full of the dead house and the dust heap and the gin palace and the clerk at the vestry with his notebook and the bone boiler's smoke on the east wind. Full also of the watercress girl in the morning and the crossing sweeper with his red hands and the link boy with his torch and the tosher in her tunnels and the old sailor with one eye who said, "Don't let the city grind that out of you." Full of Bess reading her letters. You have earned this rest. Take it. The church bell rings somewhere in the dark. You're too tired to count the strokes, and London breathes around you, and the century moves on, and the things that no longer exist begin slowly to begin to end. Good night.